looking forward to a highly engaging webinar, and we invite you to interact with each other in the chat. And if you click the More button at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to access our Q&A box. Please use this box to drop your questions and contributions throughout the conversation, and they will be brought to the attention of our moderator. The panelists will also directly engage with you through the Q&A. To get things started, I'm delighted to pass this on to our moderator, Director of Knowledge Systems at Academia 2063, Ms. Tsitsi Makombe.
Thank you very much, Lai, and many thanks to our distinguished speakers today and to all of you who are joining us. I am very delighted to be moderating today's webinar that Academia 2063 is co-organizing with the United States Department of Agriculture, Foreign Agricultural Service. USDA has been an important partner in strengthening SPS systems across Africa in partnership with the African Union Commission. In today's webinar, we will explore the links between SPS compliance, food safety, trade, and the need to mobilize SPS investments. With the domestication and implementation of the CAADP Kampala agenda underway, today's webinar is timely, as we are going to also assess options for integrating SPS considerations into the Kampala agenda. And last week, the African Union Commission launched the fifth CAADP biennial review report, and the report shows that no country really achieved the target to have functional SPS systems. And therefore, the report calls for increased investments to strengthen these SPS systems and harmonize SPS measures across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting program lined up for you. We will begin with some welcome and opening remarks, followed by a framing presentation to set the context for us. We'll move into a moderated panel discussion with distinguished experts, and then we'll open up the floor for a question and answer session. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to call on Dr. Debisi Araba, the Managing Director at Academia 2063, to deliver his welcome and opening remarks. Debisi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Makombe. Greetings, everyone, and it's a privilege to join you today for this this webinar focused on sanitary and phytosanitary protocols across Africa. I think Tsitsi has mentioned pretty much, what would have been or should be the framing remarks. These regulations form at the core the catalytic foundations for accelerated trade, not just within the continent of Africa, but between Africa and the rest of the world. We are grateful to the long-standing partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Foreign Agriculture Service, for their support, for the investment, for their vision in partnering with us for the long haul. Tsitsi mentioned the just recently launched or recently released biannual review report that showed African countries, no African country was on course or had achieved the sanitary and phytosanitary targets set within the CAADP, the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program. Now, as we look into the new phase of CAADP, or the Kampala phase of CAADP between 2026 and 2035, it is important that we not just set the bars higher, but we also ensure that we can achieve these targets not as an academic exercise, not just for research purposes, but because they are catalytic in spurring increased trade, both within the continent and around the world, and being catalytic to supporting economic transformation across the continent. And so we are doing our bit as the research community, as think tanks, as partners in progress, to deploy the science that improves the insights that will hopefully inform policy decisions across Africa. I don't want to hog the limelight. I think we are set for a really engaging conversation today. We're grateful to our eminent speakers who will share their insights from their decades of experience in the field and in practice. And so I urge you to strap in and enjoy today's session, and hopefully you glean the insights, regardless of where you sit in the stakeholder spectrum. There is something for you in this webinar today. With that, I will hand the mic or the speaking duties back to our moderator, Ms. Pakombe. Over to you, Tsitsi.
Thank you very much, Debussy, for those warm welcome remarks, but also really highlighting the importance of these SPS issues to accelerating trade as well as economic transformation. And this is trade, not just intra-Africa trade, but also Africa's trade with the rest of the world. So thank you so much for those important points and for your remarks. Next, I would like to call upon Ms. Sarah Jeleski. She's the Agricultural Counselor at USDA in Ethiopia. I would like to call upon her to give her opening remarks. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tsitsi, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone attending. On behalf of the United States Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agricultural Service, it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar on the importance of SPS compliance and trade. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is a leader on food, agriculture, rural development, and trade. Our work is grounded in public policy, guided by the best available science, and strengthened through effective management. USDA's vision is to expand economic opportunity through innovation, to help rural communities thrive, and to support agricultural production that reaches consumers around the world. For nearly a decade, USDA has been proud to support the African Union Commission and AU member states in strengthening sanitary and phytosanitary systems across the continent. This partnership has delivered important milestones, including the SPS Policy Framework for Africa in 2018, the Food Safety Strategy for Africa in 2022, and the Plant Health Strategy for Africa in 2023. Sanitary and phytosanitary issues lie at the heart of global food security and agricultural trade for both Africa and the United States. U.S. farmers and ranchers provide high-quality food and agricultural products to consumers around the world. Strong science-based and risk-based regulatory systems are essential to safeguard hard-earned productivity gains from pests and diseases and to ensure safe food for consumers. Agricultural trade is a key part of the global economy, ensuring food security, providing consumers with robust food choices, and helping to lower costs and stabilize prices. With countries trading commodities that they have competitive advantages in. The United States is the largest agricultural exporter in the world and has one of the strongest food safety systems, ensuring that we provide the world with high quality and safe agricultural products. At USDA, we support open markets and good governance so that trading partners can participate more fully in regional and international trade. Effective SPS systems are vital for human, animal, and plant health, and aligning those systems with international standards such as Codex enables smoother trade. African countries underscored the importance of investing in SPS and trade through last year's Kampala Declaration, particularly under Strategic Objective 1 on sustainable food production, agro-industrialization and trade, and Strategic Objective 3 on food and nutrition security, both central to achieving the goals of CAADP and Agenda 2063. More recently, the ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has further highlighted the benefits of trade for food security and economic prosperity. By adopting science and risk-based SPS measures, countries create a more transparent and predictable environment for agricultural exporters and ensure safer and more nutritious products for consumers. The true test will be how much African countries can invest to ensure these returns are fully realized. The CAADP framework offers a roadmap and a scorecard for that investment. Let the United States be an example, as the evolution of our modern food system over the past 100 years has led to one of the strongest drivers of agricultural-led economic growth through exports and to increase consumer access to safer food products that provide an economic multiplier for the U.S. economy as a whole. We're grateful for the strong partnership with the African Union Commission, its technical agencies, with AU member states, and all the organizations represented here today. And I especially want to say thank you to Academia 2063 for their organization's strong support and partnership, and for helping to organize this event. Thank you all for your commitment to advancing these issues, and I wish everyone a productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for those opening remarks. And yeah, thank you so much for I think the partnership that USDA has had with the African Union Commission is greatly appreciated, as you said, for over a decade, and all the milestones that you've helped to achieve leading to the AU SPS policy framework and food safety strategy. I think that partnership is greatly appreciated, including by us at Academia 2063. It's been a pleasure to partner with you in this endeavor to strengthen SPS systems on the continent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, next I would like to invite Mr. John Opong Otu. He's a coordinator at the African Union Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources, AU-IBA. He's going to deliver opening remarks on behalf of the African Union Commission. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, my sister Titi. And let me also use the opportunity to really recognize Dr. Araba in academia. I think you are doing a fantastic job. And Sarah Gillespie from the USDA. USDA has been a long-standing partner really for the African Union and SPS work across the continent. So really grateful for all the strategic partnerships. I also recognize the representatives from the different AU member states and the regional economic communities, the private sector experts and colleagues that have gathered here. And I'm pleased to really join the discussions today on behalf of the African Union. The Kampala CAADP agenda has set a very clear direction for Africa. It's a call for to transform agri-food systems so they can deliver food security, livelihoods, jobs, name them, and stronger intra-African trade. But this transformation will not happen only because Africa produces more. Production is certainly important, but it will happen when Africa produces what Africa produces can move safely, can enter markets credibly, attract investment, and command trust. Market is all about trust. And that is why SPS compliance must certainly be elevated, whether food safety, animal health, or plant health measures, they need to be elevated. So as far as the African Union is concerned, SPS is not merely a technical requirement, but it is part of an economic infrastructure of agri-food transformation. It determines whether food is safe, whether livestock and fish value chains are resilient, whether borders facilitate or limit trade, whether outbreaks are contained, and whether exporters remain competitive, and whether investors can see a predictable operating environment. The Kampala CAADP declaration or commitment already points us in this direction. Stronger SPS standards, One Health protocols, disease surveillance, veterinary laboratories, vaccine production, PPR eradication by 2030, and cooperation on transboundary animal diseases. These are not just technical issues, they are investment issues. They are trade issues. These are food security issues. These are livelihood issues. So the next step is implementation discipline. SPS priorities must move into CAADP plans, value chain strategies, budgets, frameworks, and investment pipelines. They must be costed, they must be measured, they must be linked to competitiveness, export readiness, agro-industrialization, and AFCFTA implementation. This is why today's conversation is timely. Academia 2063 has consistently helped Africa connect evidence, policy, and implementation. So this webinar gives us yet another opportunity to apply the same discipline to SPS, to ask what must be financed, who should finance it, where the business case is strongest and how SPS investment can deliver safer food and stronger trade. For the African Union, the message is clear. The countries that will gain most from Kampala CAADP agenda will not only be those that produce more. There will be those that can prove safety, those that can manage risk, those that can certify credibly, and those that can trade with confidence. At this point, I would like to express our gratitude to the US government for the tremendous work that we continue to do in the space of SPS and other partners as well, and really congratulate academia for putting up this program. We need a shift, and together we can work to ensure that SPS does not only become a compliance issue, but it becomes a trade and a market issue, an investment issue. That is where the real issues are. And with that, I would like to say a big thank you and declare the event opened. Over to you, Titi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John, for those thoughtful remarks. And I really liked what you said, that SPS issues are not just a technical issue, they are not just a compliance issue, but they are a trade issue, they're a market issue, a livelihood issue, an investment issue. That's so important. So thank you so much for those remarks, and we greatly appreciate the partnership of the African Union Commission in doing this work. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now that we've heard from our opening speakers, I would now like us to move on to our framing presentation. Here, I'm going to call upon my colleague, Dr. Gitau Tadese. He is the Director of the Department of Policy Intelligence at Academia 2063. Gitau is going to help us set the scene by delivering a presentation covering recent developments that we are seeing in non-tariff measures across Africa, but also he's also going to talk about SPS compliance challenges as well as investment options based on a study that Academia 2063 recently conducted. So over to you, Gitau, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, CC, and thank you everybody for attending this important webinar. And my job is just to brief you some of the key issues surrounding about the compliance of SPS measures. As John said, I will go a little bit more than compliance and talk a little bit about investment options based on the study that we have conducted. But so my presentation, I'll give you some introduction and background and about the non-tariff measures and others, and the cost of SPS compliance, and also the SPS investment needs, and also some of the issues for just discussion, how best we integrate SPS into the Kampala implementation, and how it has been treated, and where are how we can consider during the implementation of the Kampala CAADP. I have this very messy table here. I just derived from our publication, the 2025, the African Annual Trend and Monitoring Report, which is the most recent report. And in one of the report, in the chapters, we try to look at some of the new developments in terms of non-tariff measures within Africa for the year 2023 and 2024. And you can see that different countries have made different non-tariff measures. I mean, 28 of them. And unfortunately, out of the 28 of them, only two of them are trade liberalizations. Almost all are some, restrictions. You can see that some of the export bans and licensing requirements and all these things across different countries and across different groups of non-tariff measures that was defined by the WTO. So this shows that it is still, even within Africa, the non-tariff measures are continuing, and only few countries, like the case, the Zimbabwe, exempted, for example, internal taxation and import duties on basic goods, and the other one is Burkina Faso, authorized the export of cereals to Niger. It has never been there. And these are the only small liberalization that we see across Africa for these 2023-24. So this showed that I think we are not still yet doing enough for facilitating trade across Africa. And most of the measures are export bans, and these export bans may or may not be associated with SPS, but SPS is an important factor for some of other non-tariff measure decisions. So then, apart from the continental non-tariff measures, African exporters also faces tremendous non-tariff measures from major trade partners, including some European countries, US, and others. So these non-tariff measures impede access to regional and global markets. It's very clear. And there has been a study that have been conducted how much space is important for trade. And it showed that the space measures have a trade effect equivalent to increasing tariff by 49%. So I think you can look at it. I mean, many policymakers and maybe development partners and all this mainly focus on tariffs, but space measures, they have an effect equivalent to increasing the tariffs by 49%, which is the ad valorem equivalent. And this shows us how space is critically important for trade and investment. And non-tariff measure harmonization can boost intra-African and global trades. For sure, one way to reduce this effect is just harmonization. But unfortunately, most African countries, we have a very weak SPS systems, and the infrastructure is also weak. And these are the critical issues that, and in principle, SPS is not restrictive. I mean, it's not meant to restrict trade. It was meant to ensure safe food, animal and plant health, and also free movement of goods and services. That is the safe trade agenda. I mean, the original purpose for SPS is to allow safe food to transfer from border to borders. But unfortunately, because countries fail to comply to the measures, then it becomes a barrier, and it considered us as a trade barrier. That is where we have the critical challenge. And compliance with SPS measures therefore helps to facilitate trade and also reduce trade rejections. We have a lot of trade rejections, both from our partners within Africa and across outside of Africa, and also ensure safe food. So compliance is critical, but the issue is how to comply, and what are the issues for compliance. And our enterprises, our exporters, and also farmers, how can they apply? What are the critical challenges there? I mean, for this one, I think we want to understand the cost of compliance, how much is the cost that they are paying, and the structure of the cost, more importantly. And also, what are the investment needs by the public institutions and all those things. These are some of the issues that we have been worried. And then Academia 2063, in partnership with USDA, then we conducted studies in 4 African countries: Ethiopia, Morocco, Nigeria, and Rwanda. And the objective of that study was examining the cost of compliance for private actors, because the private actors, starting producers, processors, and exporters, they are the one who are bearing the cost of compliance at the end of the days. So then what we do is we try to estimate the cost of compliance by different operators and across different value chains. And also, more importantly, we try to identify drivers and the composition of the compliance cost. Where are the huge costs coming from? And who is really bearing all those compliance costs and all those things? Then we went and further and studied about the investment priorities for public institutions. Competent authorities, and what are the key areas for investment and all these things. So we did some descriptive. Unfortunately, our study was very descriptive and qualitative analysis, and because of some data reasons. So some of the key findings, I will not cover everything. We have the full report, and I will mention it at the end of my presentation. But I talk a little bit about the key findings. The first, compliance cost remains high. It varying across countries and commodities or value chains. That is the key. And previous studies in 2005, there was a study and that suggests that the cost of compliance in sub-Saharan Africa countries 7.7%. percent of the sales value, the total agricultural sales value, which is a huge number compared to Asians, compared to Europe and US and all those things. And that number continue to be the largest, but we observe a little bit lower than that. But in many countries, it's more than 1% of the total sales for the enterprises. That is a huge cost compared to their sales and all these things. We observed that Morocco had the highest estimated compliance cost among the countries we studied. And also internationally traded products have higher compliance costs than regionally traded products, maybe because regionally traded products may require small space measures and all these things. But generally what you observe is that internationally traded products like coffee, tea, and other fruits and vegetables, they have the higher compliance cost compared to the others. And the other one, the key finding is that most of the cost is on or is incurred by farmers. That's very unfortunate that farmers face the greatest burden, and exporters and producers often incur lower compliance costs compared to the farmers. The smallholders bear proportionally higher burdens because they lack economies of scale. They are smallholders in Africa. Then whenever they implement any compliance, the cost is very, very high for them, have limited access to finance, operate with weak technical support. So because of this, the producers bear the highest cost. And major cost items for the farmers include pesticide management, which is very critical if they have to manage for tea, coffee, and some cacao and other export products. And the pesticide management cost is very high, and fertilizer management and certified seed, the use of certified seed, which is sometimes a requirement for for some space measurement. And the aflatoxin is one of the key area where farmers are struggling with the different value chains, and that increases their costs. And also the infrastructure deficit increases costs. Yes, that's very, obvious. But the major costs infrastructure deficit includes inadequate laboratories in many, countries, and poor cold chain systems, weak storage infrastructure, and unreliable electricity, especially in Ethiopia and Nigeria, in Ethiopia and Nigeria, and limited testing facilities. And these are some of the critical costs that increases the cost of compliance, both for producers, exporters, and processors. And the other more important is the awareness problem. The awareness issue is the critical issue. Knowledge and awareness gaps raise compliance costs. Many farmers enterprise are not aware at all. And here we have some figures. You can see for different value chains that we studied in different countries. For example, in Ethiopia, we study for coffee, sesame, and tomatoes. And then the percentage of actors who are not aware of the space requirements and importance, and it's very, very high. Unfortunately, this number is very high even for coffee. For example, coffee is the number one commodity item in Ethiopia, and most of the actors, they don't have really clear ideas, understanding even the benefits of compliance on those things. So this figure shows a summary of different parameters in terms of awareness. So the details are in the report. This clearly shows that awareness is a very critical issue for cost of compliance. The less you understand, and the high cost you pay for it in terms of even rejections and others. This increases the effective cost of compliance because firms struggle to comply efficiently. And more important is the benefits. And most of the actors that we interviewed them, they have very little understanding, and they didn't convince that compliance can pay. It's because of so many reasons, maybe because of the value chain structures, and maybe the consumers are not willing to pay, and all those things. So because of so many things, still the exporters and even the farmers are not yet very much convinced of compliance. So this requires a lot of efforts to create awareness and to tell them the benefit. And then I think we go through how best we can reduce the compliance cost. Compliance is just a factor of compliance cost and non-compliance cost. I mean, non-compliance cost means the cost if you are not complying, then you have to reject your trade, and you have to pay for some fines and all those things. So it depends. I mean, whenever the non-compliance cost is high, then you comply. And whenever the cost of compliance is low, and then you comply. So there is a negative relationship between the two. But the best way for compliance is reducing the compliance cost rather than increasing the non-compliance cost, because increasing non-compliance cost means improving enforcement and improving fines, increasing trade rejections, and all this. Those have a social costs. But reducing the cost of compliance helps both the society and the private sectors. That is, I mean, with some evidence. And also, I mean, most of the compliance cost is covered by self-finance. That is the unfortunate truth for the many private actors, both exporter, traders, and farmers. And most of the samples that we interviewed show that they are financing these things either from their personal savings or internal business funds or those things. There was little government support for space matters, and also limited donor financing and low access for credit on investing on some issues, laboratories, and all those things. Those are the critical issues that comes out from the study. And then we went through the public institutions and see what are the investment needs so that the cost of compliance can be reduced through, providing some access to laboratories, infrastructures, and increasing awareness and all these things. So we asked some public institution in the 4 countries and what are the priority investment areas and how much that costs. We documented all those things, and the key finding showed that the high cost of compliance and weak space system in Africa are strongly linked to underinvestment, because public are not investing. The public institutions are not investing enough in terms of creating favorable or enabling environments, and then the cost of compliance for the private sectors is very high. Those are some of the key findings. The second key finding on the investment needs is cross-cutting investment needs across the 4 countries include upgrading laboratories and lab equipment, where centralized lab system for certification of space issues, and also capacity building and training target to technical. These are the most cited and the most reported investment needs across the different competent authorities in the 4 countries, because they don't have really enough technical personnel, and also for creating awareness with the private sectors and also the public at large. And those are the critical areas. And the other area is traceability and digital systems. These are also very critical, and regular supply of electricity, especially in Ethiopia and Nigeria. The institutions have reported that the blackouts and the electricity problem is one of the key for space non-compliance. And then there are also some country-specific priority needs that have been identified, and with their numbers and all these things, I think I have to mention some of them. For example, for Ethiopia, and the legal framework and the existence of the standard by itself is very critical. That's where these institutions are looking for. Establishing research centers that provide SPS support is one the high priority areas that comes out from the analysis. And for Morocco, reducing the cost of engaging in risk analysis. Risk analysis is one of the area where they spend a lot of money, and that's where the critical area for investment for risk analysis. In Nigeria, qualified extension workers, because that helps for the farmers to be aware and for the farmers to comply with some the space requirements from the field. And also microbiological analysis and metal detectors. These are some of the key specific demands that have been mentioned. And from Rwanda, we have different surveillance program is one of the key priorities that comes out from the Rwanda analysis. And also, in Rwanda, they have a space committee, and the space committee is not very active. It's mainly because of some financial issues and all these things that also part of it. And data and on space and food safety is also critically needed in a Rwandan case. So the details are there, and I think we can publish the report soon, and we are also publishing a policy brief. We have already published the first policy brief, and we will continue publish all the briefs so that people can have a detailed look at of the findings. Having said that, I mean, generally, my overall impression that yes, space is important and it's also becoming a very critical issue for investment and trade, but how to implement and integrate it with the Kampala implementation, which is the objective of this webinar. I think I looked at the SPS the SPS issue within the Kampala CAADP declaration. We see that on SPS related intervention areas under Kampala include, for example, under commitment area 1 and action 8, strengthen Marxist as a trade facilitation, which includes SPS investments. And also the commitment 3, which is on food safety, food security and nutrition. And there are 2 action areas that have been mentioned in the Kampala declaration, strengthening SPS standards and 1 health approach that John was talking about. And it was highly articulated, clearly articulated in that. Improve animal health, welfare to ensure food safety, food security, and contribute to public health. These are critical and openly mentioned in the declaration. It thought that, SPS has been considered as one of the priority areas in the Kampala areas. And also, I think the issue, Kampala implementation guidelines, I think the African Union has developed implementation guidelines. And the implementation guidelines, there are issues that have been mentioned. Building a strong governance system and conducting on diagnostics and analysis, investment planning, and the BR mutual accountabilities. So the issue is now what specific actions or metrics or indicators are needed to fully comply with the SPS agenda. So I just leave this presentation by probing these questions. How best specifically react? SPS is already integrated into the Kampala declaration, but the issue is now how best we can integrate into the implementation phase and then the evaluation and the BR systems. Those are the critical issues that we need the experts' opinion and the discussion from the participants. I think with that, I will conclude my presentation, and then for details, we have the policy briefs that have been published. I think our communication department will share the link, and also the full report will be published soon so that everybody will have access for that. And more policy briefs will be coming out on our specific studies. And probably if you have ideas and anything, feel free to reach out to us, and then we are happy to share further information. Thank you. Over to you, Sisi.
Thank you very much, Gitao, for that excellent presentation. You've walked us through some of the major compliance costs that we're seeing, especially in some of the 4 study countries. You also highlighted to us some of the investment needs in those countries, right? Whether it's the issue of investing in laboratories, energy, electricity, traceability issues. So yeah, thank you for highlighting all those issues and ending us on a note of reminding us that actually SPS issues have been, I think, rightly given, I think, importance in the latest CAADP Kampala agenda. But now the question is, how do we best integrate them now that countries are, planning and starting to implement the provisions of the declaration. So thank you so much, Gitao, and also thank you for staying within time. That was excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Gitao mentioned, a link to his policy brief that his presentation is based on, I think should be now available in the chat. So feel free to check it out after the webinar. So now that Gitao has provided that excellent context for us on today's subject, I would like us to basically participate in a poll question. So my colleagues will present a poll question. So they would like to hear your views. All of you who are joining us would like to hear your views on what you think is the biggest barrier to strengthening SPS systems in Africa. We kindly ask that you participate, and then we'll review or discuss the results briefly at the end of our webinar. So you're welcome to participate. So with that, I would like us to move on now to our moderated panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen. This panel discussion is an opportunity for all of us to hear from leading experts that are working on these issues that we are discussing. After I introduce our panelists, we will have hopefully 2 rounds of questioning. For each round, I'll ask each panelist to speak for about 3 to 4 minutes. And I would like to ask panelists to stay within time so that each of you have enough time to speak, but also that we have, we reserve time for an audience Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panel of experts. We've already heard from him. We do have Mr. John Opong Otu, coordinator at the African Union at the African Union Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources, AU-IBA. We also have Dr. Diana Akulo Ogwal. She's a principal officer for SPS at the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. We are also joined by Dr. John Ulumwengu today. He's a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Last but not least, we are joined by Mr. Peter Donnellan. He's a deputy head and he's the lead for monitoring, evaluation, and learning at the Standards and Trade Development Facility at the World Trade Organization. So first, I would like to turn to you, John, from AU-IBA. John is someone who works at a critical African Union agency. I would like to think you have a great bird's eye view of SPS-related risks across the African continent. So, what are the main risks to Africa's agri-food system transformation agenda if SPS issues are not fully integrated into the CAADP Kampala agenda? And I would also like you to touch on the mechanisms that AU-IBA is developing or implementing to help member states integrate SPS issues into CAADP frameworks. So over to you, John, and you have 3 to 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Tsitsi. And let me also say a big thank you to Gital for the wonderful presentation that he has made. I think he really touches on the core of the issue. So Africa doesn't only have a production problem, we also have an SPS problem as well. When you look at the CAADP, it is rightly pushing for Africa's higher production, which is good, stronger value chains, and intra-African trade. These are all good, but if SPS is not built into the implementation, the risk may be that you may produce more without being able to move products safely. The products may not be competitive, and you may not have predictability across the border. So that is the risk. Production without market access, because SPS measures have become the currency for trade. You cannot move goods without it. So you may have investment plans without investable value chains. Why is that so? So the agri-food chain sometimes is seen as risky because of disease outbreaks, foodborne diseases, plant pest outbreaks, and the rest. What SPS does is to come in and using the measures to help de-risk some of these risks, and then it now paves way for investors to come in to invest. The Kampala strategy is already asking countries to reflect their commitments on SPS in national policies, strategies, and the rest. And for Africa Union, our greatest advocacy is that SPS must sit right in the center of national agri-food systems investment plans, not at the margins, but inside, if you like, the planning, the budgeting, accountability system. That is where SPS really belongs and can be addressed. So in terms of what AU-IBA is doing, maybe before that, I would also like to give you one clear example that most of the time we refer to SPS and whether food safety, animal health, plant health as a compliance issue. Yes, it is, but SPS is more a market infrastructure issue. If you have a disease outbreak, for example, it is not only a veterinary event, it is a trade event. It's also a livelihood event because it affects farmers, it affects livestock keepers. If you take aflatoxins, for example, almost Africa loses about what, $750 million annually. PPR alone in Africa, we are looking at 147 million. And these touch on livelihoods. And so SPS is not just a compliance issue, it's a market infrastructure issue, it's a livelihood issue. And that is why we need to ensure that we have the right mechanisms. At AUIBA, there are a couple of mechanisms that we have already put in place. The first one, and Gitao had mentioned, we work together with different partners working on livestock, animal resources to ensure that livestock and related issues are adequately captured within the Kampala CAADP declaration. So issues on disease surveillance, vaccine production, PPR eradication, food safety, One Health, name them, they are all covered. So our advocacy is really helping to bring spotlight to this issue of SPS. Number two, and I use the Pan-African PPR eradication program. So PPR is a disease of small ruminant, and as I had indicated, the production cost and the losses amount to almost 147 million annually. And it's a practical way AUIBA is using to demonstrate how we are responding to the CAADP implementation. Yes, this is a disease control issue, but it is also a trade facilitation issue. And what we are doing is making sure countries have better animal health services, better veterinary services, better vaccine production so that we can reduce the risk of death of animals to this disease. The other issue I would like to talk about is on pastoralism. We have a very robust pastoralist and livestock mobility program at AUIBA. And then, as you know, pastoralism alone produces close to what, 60 to 70% of Africa's meat. And so our work focuses on making sure that pastoralists are able to move. We cannot stop mobility, but what we can do is to help with better governance and ensure that when they are moving, the sanitary conditions are well assured. And so together with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, regional economic communities, and the member states in the Sahel and other ECOWAS countries, we have now come up with a common understanding on MOU on how we can facilitate cross-border movement. That is key for market integration, and SPS is right at the heart of it. The other issue I want to mention relates to our program on harmonizing.
Wrap up a little bit, yes. Go ahead.
Harmonizing, and I'm finishing, harmonizing standards, methods, and procedures. Disease control is a big issue in Africa. In simple terms, neighboring countries need to manage diseases, certification, sanitary procedures in a compatible way. And AUIBA is working with the regs to ensure that we have a common understanding, common standards on this. And as I conclude, Tete, I would say that if Africa wants CAADP to deliver trade, jobs, safer food, and resilient food systems, SPS must be treated as a core transformation infrastructure. It must be planned, it must be financed, and measured as part of the CAADP implementation. I will stop there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John, for those really thoughtful insights and emphasizing that, yes, I think a major risk is that, if SPS issues are not being considered, then, there's a risk of producing things that you cannot move. And thank you as well for highlighting all the important work that AUIBA is doing with its partners to already make sure that SPS issues, including issues of animal health, that you also work on at AUIBA, are really at the center of National Agri-Food System investment plans and all the other work you're doing, John. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll move on to our next distinguished speaker, and that is Dr. Diana Akulo Ogwal. So Diana, it's been 5 years since trading under the CFTA agreement commenced in January 2021. From your vantage point, what are the main SPS-related trade bottlenecks that are currently affecting CFTA implementation? And what is the CFTA Secretariat doing to help address those bottlenecks? Over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Titi. I would like to also add my voice to the previous speakers to thank Academia 2063 for convening yet another session. Here we are really addressing a very important subject which is core to the implementation of AFCFTA, that is SPS compliance, and of course with a focus on mobilizing investments for safer and stronger trade in Africa. This is the core of our work. We are really trying to integrate the African market, bring the market size of over 1.3 billion people to be able to trade with each other. And on to your question about the main SPS-related trade bottlenecks affecting AFCFTA implementation, I would start by saying that implementation of the AFCFTA agreement effectively commenced in 2025, 5 years ago, as you rightfully say, and the SPS context in Africa was and is still characterized by the same challenges that were highlighted in the AU SPS policy framework. This policy framework was really forward-looking. It was specifically also designed to support with the implementation of Annex 7 on SPS of the AFCFTA agreement. So these challenges include, or these bottlenecks include inadequate implementation of uniform set of standards for animal and plant disease control or food safety. And it often leads to poor compliance with international standards, and trading at the continental level requires full compliance with international standards. And we at the AFCFTA Secretariat are aware of that non-uniformity of implementation of standards across the continent. This is also coupled with weak institutional capacities. I talked about this in the previous webinar, because we see that some key national agencies are under-resourced, and this limits their capacity or capability to carry out enforcement, border inspections, and also issuing required certification for businesses operating across borders. So that is a key concern for us at the AFCFTA Secretariat. If we have systems that cannot allow businesses to move their products across borders efficiently, then that's a problem. And this is also directly linked to the weak institutional capacities, weak inefficiencies in the SPS systems, also reflected in the limited capacity to carry out proper monitoring and enforcement of SPS standards. And all this lead to higher trading costs for the private sector, with also the ripple effect of the uptake of trading under the AFCFTA. So all those directly affect our work. And within countries, we see that the coverage of SPS matters under different ministries or agencies sometimes leads to disjointedness and delaying of trading processes. They might be the best way for the countries to move forward, but at times it also holds processes back. Additionally, we also have lack of consistency in implementing SPS policies and procedures, and which has been widely reported, yet inconsistency is not the language of economic integration. We can't afford to be inconsistent if we are going to trade among 55 of us. So that is also related to valuation of SPS services in different countries across the region. I think Getao mentioned it very clearly, the cost of SPS services. We recently did a study and we found that one private sector cost may be lower than the other one, the private sector cost in another country. So then when you are trading at continental level, when you have this inconsistency, one will be at an advantage and the other will not. And also differences in policy regulation in the regional economic communities, yet they're the building blocks of AFCFTA implementation. So we also have a situation where we see a clear problem with the private sector, their lack of capacity to comply with SPS measures. I think Getao also dwelled on that at depth. But not only are they not able to comply, but they cannot participate in the development of new regulations. And I think this is mainly due to the disconnect between the public and the private sector. Even on the table today, we are talking amongst ourselves. We are talking to ourselves, but the private sector may not actually be on the table. So we always have this disconnect. And then at the public sector level, financing. The Secretariat undertook a mapping exercise to identify measures implemented at state parties on selected value chains. The study underscored that some critical aspects of SPS measures, particularly surveillance, were not adequately resourced. So it affects the level of implementation and also the capability to meet compliance requirements. As the Secretariat, our response is summarized in the implementation of Annex 7 on SPS. So we, as the Secretariat, are coordinating of supporting countries to implement the Annex, whose objectives are very clear. 1, to facilitate trade. 2, to enhance cooperation and transparency. And then address issues of technical capacities. Last but not least, the Secretariat has a subcommittee that guides on priority activities to implement the priority actions. But above all, it also gives a platform for countries to have a mutual accountability, to get into the details why or how they should be moving. They now must report, what are we doing in this area? What are we not doing in this area? What must we do in this area? So, and also looking into several trade concerns. So I'll leave it here and come back to the rest of the issues during this discussion. Thank you, Titi.
Yes, thank you so much, Diana. Very, very important, I think, challenges that you're highlighting, that it's good to know that the Secretariat is working on them, be it the non-compliance, the issues of capacity, the inconsistency in how SPS, standards and procedures are being implemented. So all very important and good to know the Secretariat is on it. We'll come back to you in a second round. Next, I would like to move on to our next panelist, who is the other John we have today, Dr. John Ulumwengu. So John, last week, as I think it has come up earlier, last week, the AUC released the 5th Cadre Biennial Review, and the results, they are showing that there's no country that has achieved the target of having fully functional SPS system. So to you, John, the question is, the SPS index, as you know, was introduced under the Malabo Cadre Biennial Review. What is your assessment of countries' ability to adequately report on the SPS Malabo index and provide complete and reliable data? Over to you, John. You have about 3 minutes.
Thank you, Titi, and thanks for academia and USDA for organizing this very important session, very important discussion. But before I dive into the assessing the reporting on SPS, I wanted maybe to expand the presentation of SPS beyond the focus on trade. I think, and when you read again, I'll be shifting from Malabo to Kampala. When you read the Kampala Strategy and Action Plan 2026-2035, it is true that if you read it, you have, you may have a sense that the SPS falls within two strategic objectives. The first one on production, sustainable production, trade, and agro industrialization, and then the third on food and nutrition security. But my take has always been that SPS has really cut through all the commitment or now the strategic objective, because I mean the SPSS opens for you market, which if you have access to the market, regardless if it's outside or within the country, it affects income, it affects poverty, of course, it affects food and nutrition security, it affects empowerment, youth and women empowerment, so the issue of inclusivity. So, that's how I believe we have to, in quote, sell SPSS to the government, but I'll come back to it when discussing how to integrate that into the Kampala Declaration. Well, how to assess how countries have reported. I went back yesterday and this morning. I look at the overall BR, the fifth BR. Amazingly, when you look at the data, out of 55 countries, well, almost 49 reported. So they have no missing value, so to speak. So in a way, at the face value, it means that country has been reporting, which is wonderful. But the quality of the reporting, that's where we have a problem. And for those who don't know, when you look at the Malabo, the BR report, I mean, you hear SPSS, it's like one figure or one number, but it includes almost, I counted 12 information point. So the existence of SPSS laws, existence of competent authorities with clear mandate and coordination mechanism, capacity to conduct risk assessment for setting or updating sanitary measures, regionalization, quarantine and border security, surveillance and early detection of epidemiologic outbreak investigation, existence of inspection regime for establishment involved in production and processing of food. So under that SPS labeling, you have unique country have to report 12 information point. So that's for some countries, yes, they can, but for others, it's becoming a heavy burden because of fragmented institutions, weak surveillance and lab systems, limited technical capacity, and of course, some of my colleagues pointed it out, inconsistent methodologies. So most countries can provide some set of limited set of information on SPSS, but very few can generate a complete set, which include the issues around food safety, animal health, plant health, and trade dimension. And how, I mean, there are two things here. The first, Getao in his presentation pointed out the one of the key issue of the willingness on the farmers side for the premium, which is a problem for whoever wants to invest, the private sector, including, in our discussion, I think 2 days ago, I raised the issue of aflatoxin, which is a problematic. I mean, it's a huge, it's an important problem, but the willingness to pay on the consumer side doesn't allow private sector to invest. So that's where the government must come in. The second issue, I think, is the issue of the political economy of these SPSS, because when every time there is a compliance, it means you'll have winners and losers. And I don't think we have yet found a way to address that issue of political economy. Who's losing, who's winning, in a way that when we set up those SPSS compliance, we are also taking into account those who are set to lose and act accordingly. The third, and that's where I think,
wrap up, John. Yes, at this
yes,
time, so we have
yes. So the third is that we need to make sure that it's first a country needs before becoming a need for trade. I'll stop here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, John. We appreciate you digging into the data to actually sort of help us understand some of the challenges that country were facing in reporting on that SPS index. I think it just seemed like it was very burdensome. So we'll come back to how to address it in our second round. Next, I would like to move on to our fourth speaker, Mr. Peter Donnellan. STDF plays an important role in facilitating safe trade, whether by sharing knowledge, tools, and funding. My question to you, Mr. Donnellan, is how can African countries better access and use international SPS financing as well as technical assistance opportunities, including opportunities from STDF? Over to you, Mr. Donnellan.
Tsitsi, thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief. See, time is against us, and yeah, just thanks to Dr. Araba and the organizers from Academia 2063 for inviting STDF here today. And yeah, I'd just like to, I really feel that Diana from AFCFTA just really hit the nail on the head there, talking about the private sector and the financing element things. And I'll just speak to some of those areas that we've been working on recently, and just to frame that in the broader kind of financing reality that a relatively small program like the Standards and Trade Development Facility is facing, and others, development partners working in the Aid for Trade field. OECD, as many of us are aware, have been last year published in 2025 a significant squeeze in overseas development in ODA flows, up to 23.1% last year, even more so in sub-Saharan Africa, up to 25%. And this is at the same time as we had the Financing for Development outcome document last year, calling for renewed efforts across the board to strengthen aid for trade and trade-related capacity building. And at STDF, our relatively small our program facilitating safe trade over the last 20 years, historically, STDF receives roughly 100 submissions a year for a modest funding window that can approve 5 or 6 projects annually. But already in the first half of 2026, STDF has received around 400 submissions in the first half of the year already. And I mentioned, yeah, facilitating safe trade, and that's key here. So it's not all about trade. Just to echo what John was mentioning earlier, yeah, everything we do, yes, is anchored in the SDGs, in poverty. It's about incomes, it's about livelihoods, it's about youth and women's economic empowerment as well. But we've recently commissioned a study, a financing study that will be published over coming weeks. And the issues affecting programs like ours, it's not simply about finding more money, but really making, as was mentioned by other speakers today, making these SPS solutions investable. It's not only about compliance, as was mentioned before by the other John as well. And so our study that will be published soon essentially has 3 main findings that I can fly through. The first is, yes, the investment readiness is the primary constraint, and not capital availability. So there's quite a lot of funding out there. Yes, it was mentioned the national budgets. But yes, as John mentioned, yeah, we have to get these SPS issues into the national agri-food system investment plans, and also into donor programs, and for the donor programs to see the triple win there, not only for the developing countries, least developed countries, for the private sector, but also for consumers, for developed countries at home as well, receiving the safe trade on their doorsteps as well. So just to articulate this, investment proposal as well, but also development finance institutions as well, and private value chains. But fact is, we often lack the institutional capacity to translate the technical SPS priorities into the credible investment proposals. So I think it was mentioned, someone mentioned briefly earlier, but yeah, just to emphasize that we need to bridge that language gap between SPS solutions and the finance world. So a second finding in this study is the SPS financing performs best when these SPS solutions are framed as trade enabling infrastructure, which was mentioned earlier. But in terms of export revenue, yes, avoided border rejection costs, supply chain reliability, value chain competitiveness, all of these arguments. But again, not to lose sight of what John and I mentioned earlier as well, but to anchor what we're doing in the SDGs as well as we move towards that. It's a triple win, essentially. You know, a third is the private and development finance only works in specific segments under specific conditions. So there's no silver bullet here. We hear a lot about blended finance. There's no silver bullet there. Core public regulatory functions. Such as surveillance was mentioned earlier as well, but inspection, enforcement, official certification, they're all public goods and need to continue to depend on public funding. And occasional donor grants, albeit under intense squeeze at the moment. But yeah, primarily on government budgets to get them into the national agri-food system investment plans. But there is a role for blended finance in the mixed public commercial SPS services such as lab accreditation, digital traceability systems, export certification infrastructure, and things like that. But not only the blended world, but then purely commercial finance also plays its role here in packhouses, cold chains, veterinary service systems, residue management systems, and private certifications, things like that, linked to strong export contracts. Once you have the contracts, then you can access some of these, the commercial financing out there. And we have some good examples from around the world in SDF projects. Don't really have time to delve into them now, but just that message to bridge the language gap between the SPS world and the finance world. And a practical priority for African countries, I see, is to build an investment pipeline of such initiatives. Utilizing data that was mentioned, we can use like the priorities for investment into market access framework that SDF has, but also the PVS pathways or the IPPC's phytosanitary capacity evaluations, but to use them to identify which SPS investments generate the highest economic and trade returns. Yeah, so the broader lesson really is SPS financing improves, we've seen, when technical priorities are translated into economic propositions and embedded within national agriculture strategies, trade plans, and CAADP investment frameworks as well. So thanks, Tsitsi. Back to you.
Thank you very much for running through, I think, all those important insights and really emphasizing the need to translate SPS technical issues into investable programs, right? That gap that is there. So thank you so much. I know I would like to give at least one for all our panelists to at least respond to an additional question that I have for them. I'll start by going back to John from AU IBA. So John, given the high cost of compliance, I think all of our speakers have alluded to it. What are some innovative financing approaches that countries can use to support sustainable SPS investments? John, over to you. If you can do it in 1 minute, that would be fantastic, so that we can also just have a chance to interact with our audience. Thank you.
All right, I will try. So, Titi, I believe that different SPS functions require different financing models, and some of my colleagues had already hinted on. The first one is the public good. SPS functions, some SPS functions are really public goods, disease surveillance, emergency responses, and the rest. They they are needed because they protect the whole economy, and not one particular farmer or exporter or processor will be able to handle it. And so you need public financing to take care of that. But that said, I think we've also heard about the donor funding. But for purposes of sustainability, I think donor financing is useful when it is catalytic. But Africa's SPS financing needs a more sustainable financing framework. So donor funding is critical when you are looking at issues for, say, building the systems, closing the gaps and capacity gaps and the rest. But for long-term models, I think one of the issues we should be looking at is combining national budgets and cost recovery, for example, for regulatory services, vis-a-vis private sector compliance investment, where private sector finds a real economic dividend for implementing SPS measures. And we've already seen some of these in practice, where some competent authorities recover costs from regulatory services, etc. So let me summarize here, Titi, in the interest of time. I think we need a combination of financing portfolio, public goods for issues that are too large for one private sector to handle it. We need the private sector to also come in, especially when there is a clear economic dividend for it. You need blended financing, when you first need to de-risk and then allow future investment into it. So these are some of the areas that I think we should be looking at.
Fantastic. Yes. Thank you so much, John. I think that's really excellent. And yes, I think certainly public financing and catalytic donor funding. Next, I would like to move on to Diana. So Diana, also in 1 minute, how can countries better use the CFTA to implement CAADP commitments related to trade and food safety? Over to you, Diana.
Thank you. Let me try also in 1 minute. We've seen, because of increased population movement to urban areas, there is increased demand for food. And this has been driving food imports in Africa. And as we know, agriculture really accounts for 75% or thereabouts of trade within Africa. So the AfCFTA and CAADP frameworks mutually reinforce each other. If you look at commitment number 3 on ending hunger by 2025, in the previous commitment, countries committed to establish functional SPS systems to ensure safe and nutritious food while facilitating trade safe trade at the same time. And to realize this, countries must operationalize their national AfCFTA coordination structures. That way, we will be looking at the demand from both angles and ensuring that we are moving together in realizing the objective outlines in these frameworks. And also the need to mobilize and support the private sector. I'll not go back into that. They are the ones actually, moving food around, the core of trade. So we need to support them as best as we can. And countries must also resource their different national agencies to be able to carry out enforcements at various levels. For example, in carrying out border inspections and issuing required certifications, they should also build capacities, SPS capacities, and have a community, an SPS community of practice to address emerging SPS challenges and have effective emergency response strategies based on robust surveillance systems. Getachew talked about trade logistics. I will not go back to that. It was very clear. And also the need for sharing information and data. It's based on that we are able to come up with evidence-based solution. And also, we must look at SPS compliance as an opportunity, not a cost, as Getachew said. And then we have AFCFTA implementation tools that countries should use to ensure that they realize the CAADP-related commitments as well as roll out AFCFTA implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. And I think just noting that actually CAADP and the CFTA, they are mutually reinforcing. That is excellent. Next, I'll move to John. John, earlier you highlighted the challenges that countries are facing with the reporting on that Malabo SPS index. Could you briefly, in a minute or less, John, share with us some of the indicators that you think should be included in the new CAADP results framework to effectively track SPS progress, given the lessons we've learned from Malabo? Over to you, John.
Thanks, Titi. I think SPS was introduced in the middle of the Malabo implementation. I would recommend. So let's make sure that we main recommendations. First, country level, we need, for each country, needs a SPS data cluster. I think it's very important. As I explained, SPS sits in the intersection of so many other CAADP related component, food system related component. So it's important that country have the clusters and then connect to the other clusters as far as food system is concerned. Second recommendation, maybe bring down the list of those 12 to something like SPSS governance. I think it's very important to report on what is SPSS strategy in a given country, if there is one, or how is it working. Second, on food safety, the issue of foodborne outbreaks per year, that's very important. Animal health, vaccination coverage for priority diseases. Plant health, functional pest surveillance system. And of course, the issue of trade, SPS related export issues. The labs, it's very important. The number of internationally accredited labs. The issue of capacity, Diana also mentioned that. The number of trained SPS professional, and of course, because now we have this digital revolution, we need to make sure that we report on electronic SPSS reporting system in the country. So two things, a cluster, SPSS cluster for each country, and then maybe dial down the list of information indicators that country have to report on as far as SPS is concerned. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that important contribution. I think this is going to be critical as the CAADP results framework and indicators get finalized. So really, if we can reduce that reporting burden and really focus on what matters, I think that will be essential. So next, I'll move on to Mr. Donald, and I'll come back to you. You may have already maybe touched on this. So the last question that I have for you, if you can briefly speak to, how can African countries, now that they are developing these new NASIPs, what lessons and good practices from the global SPS support programs can be adapted to the African context?
Tsitsi, thanks. Yeah, so I'll keep it very quick. I was going to talk about lots of various examples we have in STDF, but a lot available on our website, and these ideas, STDF have some really good examples that have scaled in recent years. The ePhyto you may be aware of. I mentioned PIMA earlier. Also a very, very successful SADC biopesticide initiative that has scaled regionally as well as internationally. But a useful, more broader strategic way maybe I can quickly answer the question is kind of linked to some of the findings of our own STDF case study on mainstreaming scaling. Now, John mentioned the crucial word earlier, catalytic and sustainability. And we did a deep dive on scaling, and that's available on our website. I'll put a link in later. And this is, I think, is very strongly linked to broader findings from the CAADP biennial review process, particularly the importance of strong institutions, regional coordination, and monitoring systems. But first of all, like, what is scaling? We all hear this word, everyone seems to be using it now. So we try to really flesh it out. What does it mean? It simply means expanding and institutionalizing any successful innovations we may have so they create a meaningful, sustainable impact beyond a single pilot project or location. So a key word there is meaningful, important because we're looking to bring these interventions to optimum scale and to plan that intentionally. Now, there's lots of different types of scaling, but horizontal, vertical, deep, but I won't go into that now. But there are some broad lessons that we can learn from this. First, yeah, you're scaling your intervention, being at the national or development partner level, it has to be intentional. Your work is more likely to scale when scalability is considered from the design stage, including future financing and institutional ownership and opportunities for regional replication as well, or other value chains. Number two, partnerships are critical. It's fairly obvious. Number three, regional approaches really matter, and which is where, like, the African Union key, AFCFTA key, many African countries facing some similar SPS constraints, not all the same across the board as we saw earlier from Getaw's excellent presentation, but yeah, you can pool some with some similar constraints, limited technical capacity, fragmented systems, things like that. So working through harmonized regional approaches is key here. Fourth, I'd say it's scaling depends on institutionalization of what we're doing. It's not only about interesting, amazing pilot innovations, but plan from the beginning. How can this actually be institutionalized? And fifth, evidence and monitoring and learning are essential. Both the SCDF journey experience and what I read already in the CAADP biennial review show that stronger data systems, monitoring capacity, and mutual accountability mechanisms are critical for wider adoption. Thanks. I'll leave it there, Tsitsi. I know we're up for time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think great lessons. And participants, let's check out the STDF website for some of these, I think, topics that Mr. Donnellan was noting. Well, I realize we are getting towards the end of our session, but I would like to give our audience, you've been patiently, listening in. I would like to invite you to at least ask questions. Those of you who have some burning questions, you're welcome to raise your hand, and we'll unmute your mic so that you can ask our panelists as well as our presenter questions. We'll take maybe 3 to 4 questions. We'll just have one round of questions. So would anyone like to ask a question or make a comment? Please raise your hand. I don't currently see any questions.
Babakar. Yeah.
I see Babakar Lam.
Okay, please go ahead. And be brief. And if you can also introduce your name, yourself and your organization, and then state your question or comment.
You have the floor, Mr. Lam. Please go ahead. We cannot hear him, Tsitsi.
Okay, is there anybody else with a question?
We have another hand from Divine Ntokam.
Please speak if you'd like to ask.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Of course, greetings to ADBC, John, and everyone on this call, and of course, the 2 Johns, by the way, AU and Ifri. So I want to say that greetings from Columbus, Ohio. What we're discussing here is very relevant, and especially looking at the demographic difference when young people are the leaders of today and tomorrow. I'll really be grateful if the first suggestion is I'll be grateful if we try to get a webinar where young people, women are engaged in the whole process, because it's very important when we talk of CAADP, we're talking about the young people, we're talking about women, which is actually one of the aspirations of the Agenda 2063, I think aspiration 7 or so. So we'll be very happy to collaborate in this perspective. Now, my question goes to John. John, of course, John has served as the continual vice president for one of the programs where we're leading, which has to do with the livestock, fisheries, and aquaculture. So how do we think that we can actually blend the process, the CAADP process, into the livestock and animal resource sector? Over.
Thank you very much for that question. I will take another question. Do we have any other hands raised? If not, we'll turn it over to John Opong Otto to respond to that question about bringing together the livestock work and CAADP. John?
Thank you very much, Divine, and good to see you and hear from you. So, Divine, one of the things we are doing at AUIBA is to have the young people, women and youth, be part of the creation of programs for livestock, agribusiness, fisheries, and aquaculture as well. Our current program that we are doing, for example, implementing the integrated regional livestock value chain, we are actually co-creating the interventions. We see youth coming in strongly with the agribusiness component. So at AUIBA, we are not looking at the young people as mere participants, but co-creators and implementers for the work that we do. And I think that is the strategy that going forward, all the other institutions and even at the national level, we should implement. There are very serious businesses that young people are implementing, from technology to value addition and the rest. And we should have meaningful way of engaging with our young people.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can conclude the panel discussion here. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for their contributions, for their insights. You heard them. They not only highlighted the big risks of not addressing SPS issues, but they also noted what needs to be done, right? With that sort of the innovative financing that is needed. I think from AUC, we heard how AUIBA is already working with country to really make sure that SPS issues are at the core of this CAADP Kampala implementation. From the ACFTA Secretariat, they're also already making sure that they work in a very integrated way with the Kampala CAADP agenda through their work that they're doing through Annex 7, as well as the SPS technical committee that they have. And of course, John has also highlighted some of the critical issues that we'll need to address when it comes to monitoring and reporting on SPS issues going forward. They mentioned the data clusters, also really reducing that reporting burden that countries have faced. And of course, from STDF, I think they shared a lot of resources with us that I think can be quite informative as Africa works to, strengthen its SPS systems, and also the funding resources that are available there. Certainly, this is information we need to spread to countries so that they can apply and use it to strengthen their systems. And as John was reminding us, we need to go beyond trade. So I would like to call upon our Managing Director, Dr. Debisi Araba, to give us closing remarks. I'm not sure if he's still here. If he's still with us, Dr. Araba, please.
I'm here. Thanks, Sissy. This was quite the engaging conversation. I almost wish we had more time. Ketal, thank you so much for walking us through an overview of the report. We invite our participants to dive deeper into the report, and of course share within your networks. My sincere appreciation to all the speakers, everyone who's given comments, their feedback, their thoughts. This is, we've realized the challenge ahead. And I think, as been articulated by our eminent speakers today, it behoves us to ensure that we're getting the science to inform policy decisions. That this, on the basic level, the science and the evidence needs to inform policy decisions. We should, hopefully, we do not see these sanitary and phytosanitary regulations as burdens or financial burdens, but as trade enablers. Because if we can figure out the mechanisms to streamline compliance, make it affordable, and also, of course, maybe share the burden of compliance across and along the value chains, then everyone wins. And so this is really how we can make prosperity how these regulations can support, be catalytic towards prosperity, but also ensure shared prosperity, along and across value chains across the continent. So we thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm the one who has the final word, but or I have to hand it over back to Tsitsi, the MC. So Tsitsi, maybe I can hand back over to you, and then you close the session. But thank you all very much for participating. And of course, the Kampala series continues, and so we invite you to continue to participate and engage with us as we dive deeper into all the aspects that will ensure and enable African countries to be fighting fit to achieve all the objectives of the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, CAADP, within the Kampala phase by 2035. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tsitsi.
Thank you very much, Debisi, for those closing remarks and the call to action for all of us. I know the result of our poll. I would like us to just look at the result of our poll. Can we show it, Ibnu? Or I wanted us, remember, we took a poll where we asked you what you think is the biggest barrier to countries not strengthening their SPS systems. I know the results popped up a few minutes ago. Are we able to show it live?
I can see the results on my screen. Can you see them?
Okay. I cannot see. Perhaps do you mind reading it out? I cannot see the result for some reason.
Oh la la. All right. So we have here on the question of what do you think is the biggest barrier to building strong SPS systems? So the first response scored 51%, limited government funding and competing priorities. So 51% of participants voted for this. Low political and public awareness of SPS benefits, 47%. Insufficient private sector investment, 32%. And weak technical and institutional capacity, 53%. That's what we have.
Great. Thank you all for participating. I think the results show that I think all these barriers, they are big barriers in their own, but I think the one that was registering the biggest barrier is the limited government funding. Was it like with over 50%? Mm-hmm.
Actually, yes, we have two competing, right? So weak technical and institutional capacity, 53%. That's the highest. And then limited government funding, 51%.
Exactly. So thank you all for participating. I think these results really shows that these are all, I think, key barriers that are really impeding, I think, investments or the strengthening of SPS systems. So as we go, let's all continue to help raise awareness, to continue to really highlight the importance of addressing SPS issues and investing in them. So with that, thank you all again to our speakers, to all of you participants, and I'd like to hand it over to Lai to close us out. Thank you very much.
You already did. Thank you so much, Mr. T. Makombe, Director of Knowledge Systems at Academia 2063, for moderating this session. Thank you to our partners, USDA FAS, and to all the speakers who joined us today. As our Managing Director said, the Kampala CAADP series continues, and we released a Kampala Policy Brief 16 on the SPS study today. A link has been shared in the chat. We look forward to welcoming you to our next session. Until then, take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.